Hello everyone, this is Richard Symes and I'm a Baptist missionary on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. And I'm making this video because I've had quite a few people request this. They want to know how they get into schools if they come to the Philippines. So I'm just going to make a short video on how to gain access to preach the gospel in schools if you're in the Philippines. But the first thing I would do is I would write a request letter to the superintendent, and you're going to drop that off at the Department of Education. And they typically want it addressed to the superintendent by name, so you might actually have to go there one time before you drop it off and get the superintendent's name, or you might be able to get that online. And I would do this about a month before classes start. That way they have enough time to get it and process it. Usually you'll drop off your letter and then you'll come back like a week or so later to pick it up. And once you get this endorsement letter that they give you, you've given them a letter requesting permission, and then they give you an endorsement letter. You're going to take that letter to all the schools you wish to evangelize. And I would make multiple copies of this letter because sometimes teachers or principals, they accidentally keep the letter and they don't give it back. And you do have to get a new endorsement letter every year. But the second thing you should do, the second thing I would recommend is not using this letter unless they ask you to. And you can start the conversation by saying you're a missionary and you want to share the Word of God with the students. And if they're giving you a little bit of a hard time, you can just kind of press the matter by asking how many sections of students that they have. And the reason that I wouldn't show the letter right off is because a lot of times when you get the endorsement letter, it will say that you can't interrupt classes, but ideally, you want to go during the school hours to the different classes. And even if you do show the letter, a lot of times the principal or the teacher will just skim over it. But I wouldn't recommend showing it unless they request it, just for that reason. And typically, whenever you go to a school, you're going to want to try to talk to the principal, but the principal's not always there. So if that's the case, I would ask for the OIC, the officer in charge, or the head teacher. And if they insist that there's nobody there that can grant you permission to preach to the students, then you could pull out the endorsement letter and say, "See, I've got permission from the superintendent." And, sometimes that will work to get you in. And I would try to avoid having them call you back, because a lot of times, they'll say, "Oh, nobody's here that can help you. You're going to have to come when the principal's here," and they'll offer to call you back. But the thing is, they don't ever call you back. I've had so many of them tell me they're going to call me back, and probably only 3 or 4 have done that ever. So I would try as hard as you can for that not to be the case, and sometimes it's inevitable. But yeah, I would recommend not taking that as an answer, that they'll call you back, because they won't. And if they're giving you a hard time, something else you can insist is that you're not wanting a recurring schedule. You're just wanting to show up one time and share the Word of God with all the students. And you can also insist that it's only going to take about 30 minutes. And I would insist going classroom to classroom, because if you're preaching to the whole school at once, a lot of times it's hard to keep everybody's attention. And then usually you're not just going to the schools by yourself. There are other people that want to share the gospel as well. So that's just what I would personally recommend. And if you have a superintendent letter, they can't really tell you no, but sometimes principals will act like they're too busy to talk to you, or they'll hide from you. And that's the way that they basically do tell you no, because they can't tell you no if you have a superintendent letter. But what I would recommend doing then is just going to a different school for that day, and then trying to show up at a time when the principal's not there and just showing the superintendent letter. And sometimes the OIC or the head teacher will let you in. And just one last thing. If you're a guy, you're gonna at least want to pack a pair of pants. A lot of times they're not very strict about this, but I have been prohibited from entering a school before because I was wearing shorts, and it's not part of their dress code. A lot of times they don't really care, but I would recommend at least having some in your backpack or something. But I hope these tips were helpful, and obviously I'm hoping that these tips are used by a Baptist that's preaching the right gospel. If you're a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or someone else trying to get in the schools, this isn't really for you. But if anyone has any other questions, just leave me a comment and I'll try to respond to you. But God bless. Thank you.